How can a person sleep on ice at minus 30 degrees and wake up feeling completely rested? Modern tourists need high-tech sleeping bags, membrane fabrics, and chemical warmers to do this. But the indigenous people of the Great Plains had none of these things. For centuries, they lived in conditions where any mistake in preparing for bed could cost the entire family their lives. Their secret was not in their tolerance for the cold, but in an ingenious engineering system that turned the earth itself into an ally. Watch the video to the end to find out how a simple structure made of willow rods and properly tanned hides created a thermos effect in the middle of a snowstorm. What if I told you that the main danger to a sleeping person in winter does not come from the frosty air at all? Most people associate cold with wind and low ambient temperatures, but the physics of survival works differently. The ground, especially when frozen solid, is a giant heat sink capable of draining life from the body in a matter of hours. The thermal conductivity of soil is dozens of times higher than that of air, so contact with the ground kills faster than the open wind. The Plains Indians understood this principle long before the terms of thermodynamics appeared. They knew that even the warmest fur cloak would not save you if you lay down in it directly on snow or frozen ground. Under the weight of the human body, any insulation compresses, losing its air pockets and thermal properties. As soon as the fur pile is crushed, the cold of the ground begins to penetrate unhindered to the skin, cooling the internal organs. That is why the main task was to create a reliable barrier between the body and the surface of the planet. This required a special approach to the organization of the sleeping place, which differed from the summer version. The first step was always to carefully prepare the area inside the teepee, or temporary shelter. Snow was never cleared down to the ground unless it was absolutely necessary to build a fire. Trampled and compacted snow is a good insulator in itself, unlike frozen ground. It was leveled to create a dense ice crust that served as the foundation for the future bed. They never put skins directly on top of this base, as they could get wet from contact with the snow. Moisture was the second deadly enemy, as wet fur instantly turns into an icy shell. Therefore, a drainage and insulation system was needed to separate the sleeping area from the source of moisture. Coniferous tree branches were used if the camp was in the forest, or dry grass in the steppe. This lower rough layer created the first air cushion and prevented direct contact with the icy surface. The thickness of this flooring could reach tens of centimeters, depending on the severity of the weather. It was painstaking work that had to be done every time the camp was set up. Neglecting this step guaranteed a sleepless night and the risk of serious illness. The Indians created a layered pie, where each level performed its specific protective function. The bottom layer of coarse vegetation acted as a spring base and protection against condensation. On top of it, it was possible to place more delicate materials designed for comfort. The entire structure resembled the foundation of a house, which is invisible but supports the entire building. This approach to insulation from below was universal for all tribes living in cold regions. It was basic knowledge that was passed down from generation to generation as the foundation of winter survival. Without understanding the thermal conductivity properties of the ground, no hunter would have ventured far from the main camp. Insulation from the ground was more important than a roof over one's head. Interestingly, many modern survival techniques are based on the same principles but use synthetic mats. Ancient craftsmen, on the other hand, used only what nature provided, demonstrating incredible ingenuity. They turned a potentially deadly overnight stay into a safe rest. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about how modern technologies compare to these centuries-old methods? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about how the first orthopedic mattress was created in the wild? For nomadic peoples, the question of comfortable and safe sleep was no less important than finding food or building shelter. The secret to a stable and soft bed was the use of a special design known as a willow mat, which can be called the prototype of the modern bed frame. It was not just a random weave of branches, but a technologically refined product, tested by many generations. Willow rods were selected for a certain thickness and elasticity because those that were too thin broke. and those that were too thick did not bend and did not provide the necessary cushioning. They were collected in large quantities along the banks of rivers and lakes, where willows grew quickly and densely, forming entire thickets. These rods were carefully cleaned of bark, sorted by length, and tied together with tendons, which served as strong and elastic threads. The result was a flexible but durable canvas that could support the weight of an adult without bending. The main trick was that the rods were not tied tightly together, but with small gaps, creating a characteristic lattice structure. Thanks to this, the structure could be rolled up for transportation, which was critically important for a nomadic lifestyle, where every item had to be mobile. When unfolded, such a mat formed an elastic platform that supported the body evenly. This gave an effect reminiscent of modern orthopedic mattresses. The ends of the mat were attached to special wooden tripods or lightweight portable frames that resembled bed backs and gave the bed its shape. The result was not just a place to sleep, but a kind of reclining chair raised above the ground and insulated from the cold. The air between the rods served as a natural insulator and acted as an air cushion. The cold rising from the ground at night got stuck in this layer and did not reach the body. This solution significantly reduced the risk of nighttime hypothermia, especially in cold steppe areas. The comfort provided by this design cannot be overestimated. Such a mat also performed an important hygienic function, allowing sand, dust, and debris to easily fall through the rods directly onto the ground. The skins and furs that were laid on top remained clean and dry for much longer, which reduced the need for daily cleaning. In addition, the elasticity of the willow provided excellent back support, helping to relax the muscles after a long journey or hard work. People quickly noticed that after sleeping on such a mat, their backs hurt less than after spending the night on the bare ground or rough flooring. It was a complete piece of furniture, thought out to the smallest detail. Such mats were often passed down in the family from generation to generation. Making one such mat could take several days of painstaking work, requiring skill and patience. The women of the tribe decorated the edges of the mats with geometric patterns, embroidery, or beads, turning each mat into a unique work of art. In wealthy families, such decorated mats became a status symbol, showing the skill of the hostess and the prosperity of the family. But even the simplest mat, made of ordinary twigs and without decorations, was a vital element of everyday life. It was especially important to have such a mat in winter, when the ground froze and became dangerously cold. Losing a mat in winter was a real disaster that had to be remedied immediately. Layers of softer material, fur, grass, wool, or skins, were laid on top of the willow base, creating an acceptable surface for sleeping. But it was the willow that provided the rigid structure and proper weight distribution. Without this base, the soft skins would quickly crumple, forming lumps and losing their heat-insulating properties. The combination of a rigid frame and soft filling is used in all modern mattresses, including expensive orthopedic models. Indigenous peoples came to this solution empirically, observing nature and experimenting with available materials. It was this experience that allowed them to survive in the most difficult climatic conditions. The size of the mat usually corresponded to a person's height, so that the body lay completely on the support and did not hang in the air. However, there were also wider options designed for family sleeping or for use as a common couch by the hearth. When folded, the mat took up little space and could be easily attached to a saddle, pack, or sled. Its mobility allowed a full-fledged sleeping place to be set up in just a few minutes, which was indispensable during frequent transitions. For a people who were constantly on the move, this solution was ideal. It was precisely such items that determined the rhythm of nomadic life. Willow mats were also used during the day as backrest for sitting, creating a comfortable space by the hearth or in the shade of a tent. Versatility and lightness made this item indispensable in the daily life of the nomads of the plains, where each thing had to perform several functions at once. It was one of those items that was always taken along, even if the journey was long and difficult and some of the belongings had to be left behind. Losing a mat in winter was a serious problem because without it, a person lost an important barrier between themselves and the ground. Therefore, each mat was cherished and repaired at the first opportunity. The technology for making such mats has remained virtually unchanged for centuries, passed down from generation to generation like a precious recipe. It was perfected and required no changes, because it was perfectly suited to the conditions of people's lives. Simplicity, reliability, and functionality were the three qualities that underpinned the way of life of the indigenous peoples of North America. This distinguished their products from many European counterparts, which were often complex but not very practical. Have you ever wondered why natural materials are so often more effective than plastic and synthetics in extreme conditions? Want to know the secret that saved lives at -40 degrees? The main source of warmth in harsh winters was bison hides, which had unique thermal insulation properties. Bison wool is dense and curly, creating a thick barrier to air. The animal's winter hide was especially valuable, as the undercoat reached its maximum density during this time of year. However, simply removing the skin was not enough. It had to be properly tanned. The tanning process was long and laborious, transforming the tough skin into a soft and pliable fabric. Women scraped the inside of the hide, removing fat and membranes, and then impregnated it with a special compound made from animal brains. This made the skin elastic and prevented it from hardening in the cold. The finished bison capes, or robes, were used as mattresses and blankets. An important detail was how exactly these skins were laid out for sleeping. The bottom layer was always placed first side up to create a soft and warm base. The top layer, which was used for covering, was usually placed first side down against the body. This arrangement created a closed contour that kept the person's heat inside the cocoon. The fur fibers intertwined, creating thousands of microscopic air pockets. The air in these pockets was heated by the body and did not escape. The thick bison skin served as a windbreak, preventing drafts. The weight of such a skin was considerable, but this worked to the advantage of the sleeper. The heavy blanket fits snugly against the body, leaving no gaps for cold air to penetrate. Under such weight, a person felt protected and their muscles relaxed involuntarily. This can be compared to the effect of modern weighted blankets used in therapy. Sometimes several layers of hides were used if the frost was particularly severe. Thinner deer or antelope hides could be laid between the layers of bison hides. This created a multi-layered system that worked more effectively than a single thick layer. Each layer added an additional barrier to heat transfer. Bison wool had another important property. It was excellent at wicking away moisture. If a person sweated during sleep, the moisture passed through the pile and evaporated without cooling the skin. This hygroscopic property prevented hypothermia, which often occurs due to wet clothing. Dryness was the key to retaining heat. Old and worn skins were not thrown away, but used as additional bedding under the main mattress. They created another insulating layer between the willow mat and the bed. Thriftiness and rational use of resources were the basis of survival. Not a single piece of fur was wasted. On particularly cold nights, people could sleep wrapped in skins with their heads covered, leaving only a small opening for breathing. Condensation from their breath settled on the outer pile, turning into frost, which was easily shaken off in the morning. The inside remained dry and warm. A bison skin was not just an everyday item, but a real lifeline in an ocean of cold. It enabled people to survive where, without it, they would have perished in a single night. Like this, if you are impressed by the ingenuity of this ancient survival system. Ready to learn the shocking truth about the design of Native American dwellings? It would seem that to keep warm, you need to seal all the cracks and insulate the space as much as possible. But in the Teepee, everything was done exactly the opposite. The peoples of the Great Plains knew that complete airtightness leads to dampness, suffocating smoke, and the accumulation of carbon monoxide, so they developed a system that both retained heat and provided ventilation. The secret to a cozy indoor microclimate lay in a complex air circulation system controlled by a special inner lining. This lining, called an ozone or liner, was a piece of fabric or leather stretched inside the teepee along the walls, forming a kind of second protective shell. This solution, simple at first glance, was the result of centuries of practice. The liner was attached to poles at a height of about 1.5 to 2 meters and descended to the ground, forming a dome-shaped curtain. It created a second wall, separated from the outer covering by an air gap, which acted as a natural insulator. Cold air entering under the lower edge of the outer cover did not immediately reach the people, but first entered this hidden space between the layers. Instead of blowing on the sleeping people, who were already tired after their journeys. The cold air gradually warmed up as it rose between the two layers of fabric. The warm air rose and the cooled air was replaced by new air, creating natural circulation. This allowed the inside of the teepee to maintain a surprisingly stable temperature. This upward flow created a draft that drew smoke from the fire up to the top opening, preventing it from accumulating. This solved two problems at once: ventilation and thermal insulation of the living area, which was vital in the harsh winters. Inside the teepee itself, separated by a liner, warm, still air was preserved, which hardly mixed with the cold outside air. Drafts passed behind the liner as if the wind was hitting an invisible wall without disturbing the inhabitants. Even with strong gusts of wind, the interior remained stable. This made the teepee one of the most effective portable dwellings of its time. The height of the liner was calculated to protect a sleeping person from cold air currents, even if they were lying on the floor. This was no accident. Generations of people had observed how air was distributed inside the shelter and refined the dimensions of the structure. Even if a blizzard was raging outside or the north wind was howling, it was quiet and peaceful behind this warm screen. The air gap between the layers worked like double glazing in modern windows, trapping heat inside and preventing cold air from entering. It was one of the most effective ways to insulate a lightweight portable dwelling without using heavy materials. This simplicity made the teepee affordable and ideal for nomadic life. The bottom edge of the liner was pressed tightly against the ground and secured with belongings, bags, dishes, or special stones to eliminate any gaps. This sealed the interior space and prevented cold from seeping through the floor, which was the most vulnerable element of the dwelling. All winter life took place inside this protected circle, where people could cook, sleep, and discuss tribal news. Outside the liner, firewood and tools were stored, creating an additional buffer and protecting against sudden gusts of wind. This cold corridor between the layers made the dwelling both warm and ventilated. People knew that without the liner, wintering would be almost impossible. At the top of the teepee, above the liner, the air was cooler, but this area served as a natural reservoir for stale air and smoke gases. This was necessary for the normal burning of the fire, which could maintain heat throughout the night. The balance between fresh air intake and heat retention had been perfected over centuries of practice, and every family knew how to manage it intuitively. If the teepee was closed tightly, the fire would simply suffocate and fill the room with smoke, creating a life-threatening situation. Controlled ventilation was the key to comfort and safety. That is why the teepee was rarely stuffy or musty. The liner material was often decorated with drawings depicting the exploits of the owner or the history of the family, turning the interior of the teepee into a kind of gallery. This made the interior not only functional, but also aesthetically appealing, creating a feeling of comfort. Visual isolation from the cold outer wall also played a psychological role. People felt protected and did not see the dampness or frost that settled on the outer covering. Artistic motifs strengthened the connection with ancestral traditions and helped children remember the legends of their clan. Each liner was unique and preserved the inner atmosphere of the family. In this way, housing became part of the cultural heritage. This system allowed the inside of the teepee to remain above freezing even in severe frosts, when everything outside was frozen. The temperature difference could reach 30 or even 40 degrees, which made life in winter quite comfortable. At the same time, the structure remained light, mobile, and suitable for a nomadic lifestyle. No modern tent without a stove is capable of such efficiency, even with synthetic materials. The teepee combined natural ventilation and thermal insulation. This explains why it has been used for centuries and has changed only slightly. Installing the liner was a mandatory procedure in preparation for winter and was carried out by the whole family, as health and survival depended on it. In summer, it could be removed or rolled up for additional ventilation, turning the teepee into a spacious and cool tent. This adaptability made the teepee an ideal dwelling for a sharply continental climate, where the temperature could change by tens of degrees in a single day. The dwelling seemed to breathe, adapting to the weather, but at the same time not letting precious heat escape. The liner served as the basis for interior comfort. Its appearance became one of the most ingenious engineering solutions of the indigenous peoples. These peoples' understanding of aerodynamics and thermodynamics was intuitive, but surprisingly accurate and time-tested. They used the energy of wind, heat, and air movement in the same way that modern engineers do in climate systems. This was their wisdom, born of observing nature and striving for harmony with it. And although their dwellings were made of wood, leather, and fabric, they functioned at the level of advanced engineering structures. Do you think the double wall principle could be applied in modern tourism? In addition to passive insulation, the indigenous people also used active heat sources that continued to work after the fire had gone out. One of the most common methods was the use of heated stones. The stones were selected to be of medium size, preferably round in shape and dense in structure, so that they would not crack from the heat. They were placed in the center of the fire a few hours before bedtime so that they would warm up thoroughly. When it was time to go to bed, the hot stones were removed from the fire with sticks or horn tongs. They were never used barehanded to avoid burns and setting fire to the skins. The stones were wrapped in pieces of old leather or thick raw hide. Sometimes dry grass was used as a lining inside the bundle. These bundles were placed at the foot of the bed, under the top layer of blankets. The stone acted as a hot water bottle, slowly releasing the accumulated heat over several hours. This kept the feet warm, which is key to warming the whole body. The heat from the feet spread throughout the body via the bloodstream. In some cases, heated stones were buried a short distance below the sleeping area. A layer of earth was poured on top and insulating mats were laid down. The earth warmed up and served as a warm floor for most of the night. This method required caution so as not to overheat the soil and cause smoldering. The stones had high heat capacity, which made them ideal energy accumulators. They cooled down much slower than air or fire coals. By morning, when the fire in the hearth had long since gone out, the stones were still warm. This helped to wake up in relative comfort. The use of stones saved firewood, which could be in short supply in winter. There was no need to keep a large fire going all night. One load of firewood in the evening was enough to heat the stones. This was especially important in the treeless prairie regions. The rational use of fuel was a matter of life and death. In addition to stones, other items were also used, such as leather bags filled with hot sand. Sand heated up faster than stones, but also cooled down faster, so it was used for quick warming. Stones, on the other hand, were a means of maintaining the temperature for a long time. This practice was widespread, from the northern forest to the southern plains. It did not require complex equipment, only knowledge of the properties of materials. Nature itself provided everything necessary for heating. The ability to see a source of comfort in an ordinary cobblestone was part of the culture. Sometimes heated stones were used to dry wet shoes or clothes overnight. They were carefully placed inside moccasins wrapped in grass. This prevented the wet leather from freezing and kept the shoes soft. Wearing warm shoes in the morning was a huge advantage. The hot stone method is the prototype of modern heating pads and heating systems. The principle of transferring stored heat remains unchanged. Ready to learn the shocking truth about what Native Americans slept in to keep warm? Contrary to popular belief, sleeping fully clothed in fur outerwear was not the best idea. Tight clothing constricted blood vessels and impaired circulation, causing the limbs to freeze quickly. In addition, warm clothing could cause the body to sweat, and moisture, as we already know, is a path to hypothermia. Therefore, outer clothing was usually removed or loosened at night. They remained in undershirts and leggings made of soft suede, which did not restrict movement. Suede is a breathable material that also retains body heat well. It worked like thermal underwear, creating a microclimate directly on the skin surface. It was important for clothing to be dry so they would change before bed if their daytime clothes had gotten damp. There was also a unique practice of applying fat to the skin for additional protection. A mixture of bear or other animal fat was applied to the face, hands, and sometimes the entire body. The fat created a thin film that reduced moisture evaporation from the skin's surface and retained internal heat. It was a kind of biological spacesuit. This layer of fat also protected the skin from frostbite and drying out in the dry, frosty air. In conditions where water for washing was scarce and often froze, greasing was also a hygienic procedure. The fat was mixed with herbs to give it a pleasant smell. Such cosmetics were vitally necessary. Moccasins were taken off at night to give the feet a rest and restore blood flow. Instead, special sleeping socks made of soft fur with the fur inside were worn. They were loose and did not squeeze the ankles. Often, dry, soft grass was placed inside for additional insulation and moisture absorption. The head was covered with a hood made of skin or simply covered with the edge of a blanket. Heat loss through the head is very significant, so special attention was paid to protecting it. Long hair also served as a kind of scarf when let down. All the body's natural resources were used to conserve energy. It is interesting to note that people slept in groups, huddling close to each other. Heat exchange between bodies was the most effective way to keep warm. Children and the elderly always slept in the center, surrounded by the strongest and warmest members of the family. It was a collective survival system. Clothes taken off at night were placed under the head or on the sides of the sleeping place. They served as additional insulation and a pillow. In addition, this way they remained warm until morning, and it was not so unpleasant to put them on. The morning began with quickly putting on warm clothes. The ability to adjust layers of clothing depending on the temperature was an essential skill. Overheating was as dangerous as hypothermia. The Indians felt this balance on an intuitive level. Their clothing was a modular system, perfectly adapted to the environment. This experience teaches us that sometimes less is more. Too much clothing can be more harmful than too little. Do you agree that choosing the right clothing is more important than the thickness of a jacket? For tribes whose territories extended into more northern regions or high mountains, snow was not an enemy, but a valuable building material that they used as confidently as southern tribes used grass or clay. They knew a paradoxical fact. Snow, being cold to the touch, is able to retain heat thanks to the huge amount of air between individual crystals. These air pockets created a layer of natural insulation, similar in properties to modern mineral wool. Therefore, when deep, fluffy snow fell, it was used to insulate homes from the outside, turning the environment into part of the structure. People observed that animals also burrowed into the snow to keep warm and adopted this strategy. Thus, nature became an ally in the struggle for warmth. Snow was raked to the base of a teepee or other shelter, creating a high embankment around the entire perimeter, sometimes as thick as a palm and sometimes as wide as half a meter. This snow embankment covered even the smallest gaps between the cover and the ground, completely blocking drafts, which were the main source of nighttime cooling. The higher the embankment, the warmer it became inside the floor, because cold air stopped seeping in. Sometimes the walls were covered with snow up to a meter high, creating a kind of plinth that strengthened the structure. In some families, this work became a ritual of preparation for winter. Children often helped, turning the process of insulation into a game. During heavy snowstorms, snowdrifts could pile up to the very top of the dwelling, completely covering the lower part of the roof and turning the teepee into a kind of snow cave or igloo. This only improved the thermal insulation as the wind stopped blowing the heat out through the thin walls, as if the dwelling had been wrapped in a thick winter blanket. Inside such a snow-covered cone, a stable temperature was maintained, warm enough for living, even if it was -30 or lower outside. The main thing was to make sure that the smoke hole at the top was not blocked. Otherwise, the fire would not work properly. Sometimes it was necessary to climb up and clear the top with a long pole. Such maintenance was not difficult, but it was vital. The peoples of the subarctic built temporary shelters entirely out of snow, or combined it with branches to create structures resembling miniature igloos. Fir or spruce branches were stuck into the snow around the perimeter, creating a dome-shaped frame, which was then covered with snow from above. The result was a quick-to-build shelter that could protect against blizzards or sudden cold snaps. Inside such a snow shelter, the temperature rose above zero only due to breathing, the heat of the fire, and the warmth of human bodies. Even a few candles could make the air inside much warmer. It was one of the most reliable ways to survive a snowstorm in the desert tundra. The use of pine branches was closely linked to snow architecture and was considered an essential element of winter life. Pine branches were laid in a thick layer on the snowy floor, creating a springy, fragrant, and warm carpet that became the basis for a sleeping place. The sharp needles held thousands of small air pockets, insulating the person from the snow and preventing the body from coming into direct contact with the cold surface. This method is still the gold standard for survival in the forest because it requires no tools and works in almost any conditions. The pine needles also soften the surface, making sleep much more comfortable. For many hunters, this was their only mattress in winter. Snow was also used as a source of water, which saved people from having to look for a hole in the ice or spend a long time melting ice. But it was never eaten cold, so as not to lose body heat, because snow cooled the body from the inside and could cause hypothermia. Therefore, snow was melted in pots, leather bags, or stone bowls by throwing hot stones heated in a fire into them. This method allowed warm drinking water to be prepared quickly, even in the field. Conserving the body's energy was a priority, and every little thing was taken into account. People knew that improper handling of snow could cost them their lives. Inside the snow shelters, there was always an amazing silence, because snow absorbs sound perfectly and creates a feeling of complete isolation from the outside world. This made it possible to rest fully, without hearing the howling wind and cracking ice outside, which was of great importance for a person's psychological state. The psychological comfort in such a white den was very high, because a person felt protected, as if in the womb of the earth. The soft, diffused light penetrating through the snow walls made the space almost cozy. Many hunters and explorers noted that they slept better in such shelters than in some wooden huts. It was a real gift of winter. However, snow had to be handled with care. If the temperature inside rose too high, the walls began to melt, turning into a wet, loose layer. Water dripped onto belongings, soaking clothes and furs, which sharply reduced their insulating properties and could lead to hypothermia. Therefore, the inhabitants of snow dwellings were skilled at regulating the temperature by opening and closing the entrance or small ventilation slots. It was an art of balance on the verge of melting, requiring experience and attentiveness. Every gesture mattered, because a mistake could destroy the shelter in a matter of hours. But the experience of generations helped people avoid such mistakes. Insulation with snow was a seasonal adaptation that disappeared with the arrival of spring, when temperatures rose and the snow lost its shape. But in the darkest and coldest months, it was snow that became the main protector against death, turning into a reliable wall between man and the harsh elements. Nature provided both poison and antidote at the same time. The cold killed, but frozen water saved. People who understood this paradox were able to survive in the most extreme conditions. Snow became their ally in the struggle for life. The ability to turn hostile elements into resources distinguished experienced survivalists and was passed down as important knowledge from parents to children. They did not fight winter, but cooperated with it, using its power against itself. Snow walls were warmer than wooden ones if you knew how to build and maintain them. That is why the winter shelters of indigenous peoples are considered among the most effective in the history of survival. Fire in a teepee is not just a pile of burning wood, but a complex tool that requires skillful management. The hearth was located directly under the smoke hole, but its design had its own nuances. The hearth was often made in a small depression, the edges of which were lined with stones. This prevented the coals from scattering and created additional thermal mass. Special types of wood were chosen for night heating. Fast-burning branches were only suitable for cooking. For the night, thick logs of hard wood were laid, which could smolder for hours, giving off even heat. Aspen or poplar burned quickly, while oak or dense pine gave off long-lasting heat. There was a technique for stacking wood that allowed the fire to burn slowly and economically. The logs were placed close together or in a star shape, moving them toward the center as they burned. This made it possible not to get up every hour to throw wood on the fire. The person on duty, if one was assigned, simply pushed the logs with his foot. An important element was a heat reflector. Behind the fire, opposite the sleeping area, a flat stone or a damp wooden block could be placed. This screen reflected infrared radiation back towards the sleeping people. Instead of escaping into the walls, the heat was concentrated in the living area. The size of the fire inside a teepee was always small. A huge flame was dangerous because of the sparks that could burn through skins or dry grass. In addition, a large fire created too much draft, sucking warm air out. A small but hot fire was more effective. The smoke from the fire also played a role. It permeated clothing and skins, making them less attractive to parasites. In addition, the smell of smoke was the smell of home and safety. The ability to build a fire without smoke inside the room was a sign of a skilled housewife. Coals were valued even more than an open flame. It is coals that provide the main radiant heat that warms objects deeply. Before going to bed, the fire was allowed to burn down to red coals, which were then lightly sprinkled with ash. This slowed down the cooling process and kept the heat until morning. In the morning, the still-burning coals were removed from under the layer of ash to start a new fire. Keeping the fire going was a sacred duty. Losing the fire in winter meant serious problems, as it was difficult to start a new one with frozen hands. Often, the coals were carried in special horn or clay containers. Fire was the heart of the home, around which all life was built. Its light and warmth created a psychological barrier against the darkness and cold of night. Caring for the fire was a form of meditation and service to the family. Even in the absence of firewood, dried bison dung or kia was used on the plains. It burned slowly, gave off a lot of heat, and had a specific but not unpleasant smell. This fuel was available wherever herds passed and saved people in the treeless steppe. Survival in the cold depended not only on external sources of heat, but also on the body's ability to generate energy from within. The diet of indigenous peoples underwent significant changes in winter. The basis of the diet was fatty and protein foods, which took a long time to digest and provided a powerful release of calories. The main winter food was pemmican, a concentrate made from dried and powdered bison meat mixed with melted fat and berries. This product had tremendous energy value. A small piece of pemmican could sustain a warrior's strength for an entire day. Fat was the most effective fuel for the human biological furnace. Pemmican was eaten not only during the day, but also often before bedtime. Digestion of fatty foods raised body temperature as the body expended energy to break down fats. This is called the specific dynamic action of food. A full person feels much less cold than a hungry one. The bodies of people living in constant cold have adapted on a physiological level. They developed what is known as brown adipose tissue, which is capable of directly converting calories into heat, bypassing muscle shivering. This feature allowed them to withstand temperatures at which Europeans would already begin to shake uncontrollably. Water also played an important role. In winter, the body loses a lot of moisture through breathing, and dehydration occurs imperceptibly. Dehydrated blood thickens and circulates less efficiently, leading to freezing of the extremities. Therefore, hot herbal decoctions or meat broths were drunk constantly. Hot broth was the best way to quickly warm up from the inside. The warm liquid instantly transferred heat to the internal organs. A pot of broth was often kept constantly by the fire, ready to feed and warm anyone. It was a simple but effective way to prevent hypothermia. The lack of plant-based food was compensated for by the consumption of animal organs, which are rich in vitamins. The liver, kidneys, and heart were eaten first. This supported the immune system and overall body tone. A healthy metabolism was the key to good thermoregulation. The diet was subject to the rhythms of nature. People ate heartily when there was food, storing fat for the future. A small layer of subcutaneous fat in humans is a good insulator in itself. Being thin in winter was a dangerous disadvantage. Children were taught to eat this kind of food from an early age. The taste of fatty meat without salt and spices was natural and desirable for them. Eating habits shaped their resistance to the harsh climate. Thus, nutrition was part of a thermal protection strategy. The Indians heated themselves from within with high-calorie fuel. Without pemmican, the conquest of the northern plains would have been impossible. Physical training and equipment played a huge role, but psychological attitude was no less important. The Indians of the Great Plains perceived cold not as an enemy to be fought, but as part of the natural order of things. They knew how to endure discomfort without panicking or straining themselves, which in itself conserved energy. From childhood, boys and girls were hardened. Morning swims in the icy river were common practice for many tribes, even in winter. This trained the blood vessels and, more importantly, the will. A person accustomed to icy water did not go into shock from the night cold in a teepee. This calm attitude toward extreme conditions amazed European travelers. Where white people complained and suffered, Native Americans simply wrapped themselves more tightly in their cloaks and went about their business. The ability to turn off the perception of cold was a kind of meditative practice. Sleeping in the cold required the ability to relax. If your muscles are tense from fear of freezing, your blood circulation deteriorates. You had to trust your skins, your fire, and your companions. The sense of tribal community provided powerful psychological support. Winter evenings were a time for stories and legends. Sitting by the fire, the elders told myths that strengthened the spirit of the young. When the mind is occupied with heroic images, The body is less aware of discomfort. Culture worked for survival as effectively as technology. In the Native American worldview, nature was alive and animated. Wind, snow, and frost were spirits that could be negotiated with, or at least respected. This reduced the level of stress in the face of the elements. Fear kills faster than cold, and they knew it. Endurance and stoicism were considered the main virtues of a warrior. Complaining about the cold was shameful. This social norm forced people to mobilize all their internal resources. Strength of spirit warmed them, as well as a bison skin. Of course, this did not mean that they did not feel the cold. They simply knew how to live with it. Their daily life was geared towards minimizing unnecessary movements and conserving heat. Psychology and daily life were inseparable. Observing animals also taught them lessons in behavior. People copied the poses of animals in their sleep, their ways of sheltering from the wind. Learning from a wolf or a bear was not considered shameful. Ultimately, survival was the result of harmony between the physical and the spiritual. Confidence in one's abilities and knowledge allowed one to sleep peacefully where others saw only death. The secret to comfortable sleep on frozen ground turned out to be neither magic nor superhuman endurance, but a combination of ingenious engineering solutions and a deep understanding of the laws of nature. Multi-layered insulation from below, wind protection from above, the correct use of materials in their own bodies, all this came together to form a single life support system. The Indians did not try to remake nature. They integrated themselves into it using willow rods, bison skins, and snow as tools to create comfort. This experience shows that human intelligence is capable of creating comfort even in the harshest conditions if we act in concert with the surrounding world rather than against it. Which of these ancient methods did you find most surprising or practical? Perhaps you will try using the willow mattress or heat reflector principle on your next hike. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the channel to discover new facets of the history of human survival.